here today to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart. Can everyone hear me, by the way, on the back? Okay, I will try to keep this level of volume all the time. All right, so we're going to be talking about product delight, what it is. Hopefully, I will demystify what you already know about delight and make you think about how to put that into your own product. But to start, I want to introduce a little bit myself for those who don't know me yet. My name is Nesrine. I came from Paris today. I live in Paris. I've been a product manager and a product leader for most of my career. I had the chance to work on globally used and loved products around the globe, like Skype, Spotify, Google Meet, and Google Chrome. And I'm also a speaker. I enjoy being on stage to talk about whatever product insights I have in mind. But actually, very recently, I was on the stage, and I've got a quite challenging question. Someone asked me, like, hey, since you've been working on these loved products, is there any common thread or something in common that you've seen and we can copy, or at least we can steal from you? And to be honest, I had no idea how to answer that question, but it kept like popping in my mind. How can I answer? I mean, it should be there something. So after a few reflection, I came to the following conclusion, which is, yes, there is something in common. I just didn't put words to it, but these companies invest heavily into creating emotional connection between products and users. What I mean is that there is a huge investment, a considered investment, an unconscious investment about creating loved products. And that's why I actually left Google last year to dedicate myself 100% to this mission and allow to make this like a more accessible and actionable for everyone. So in order to explain what it is, I usually start by asking this very simple question. What is your favorite product? I want you to think for a moment about what's your favorite product. I love asking this question because I very much enjoy the range of answers that I usually get. Some people might choose product for the productivity sides that they get out of the product, and some others think about products because they allow them to feel certain emotions, or because it allows them to feel comfort or less stressed, or whatever emotion that comes at that time. And sometimes I don't even know how to explain that. And that's even more fascinating because we as a human being connect with products at different levels. We might connect for the functionality part, but we also sometimes connect for the emotional part, or because it honors some emotional needs that we were not even aware of. So, as I mentioned, our users are using our products for two complete different reasons. These reasons could be functional, like for example, I want to send you an SMS, I want to book a flight, I want to listen to music. Or sometimes we go to product for the emotional side, like I want to feel relaxed, I want to feel a better version of myself, or I want to feel less lonely. So I call this product delight. So product delight, or the essence of product delight, is this combination of functional and emotional sides into one single product. And by the way, I spoke about emotional connection, and it's not a new topic. Honestly, like if we have designers here in the room or marketers in the room, this concept of emotional connection is quite established among marketers and designers. The truth is, it's just not well spoken about in product and in business, which is even worse because it creates this gap. Like designers are pushing for emotions, marketers are pushing for emotions, but business are like, what's the key star, North Star metric, or what's the OKR, and I don't care about emotions. But now, why did I call it delight? Is because every time I talk to a product professional, they all agree that we should delight our users. They just don't know how to do that. So that's why I tried to put my soul, my heart, my experience into this, and I'm going to share with you the secret for creating delight. But before we get into that, I want to challenge you a little bit. I want you to think about the theoretical definition of delight. I promise that's the only slide about theory. The rest is going to be all practical. So delight is an emotion. And there's a professor called Professor Plutchik who actually created what we call the wheel of emotion. Maybe some of you have seen it. And he actually conceptualized delight as two primary emotions. Could you guess what are these two primary emotions that create delight? Come on. Joy, yes. We have one. What's the second? Yes, absolutely. Actually, to create delight, you have to be in a moment where you are experiencing at the same time joy and surprise. So just think for a moment, you're in a moment, happy and surprised at the same time, you are delighted. Enough of theory. I promise, that was the only thing. Now I want to get to the practical side. What really creates delight among our users? Or how can we create delightful products? And I want to share with you what I call the 3 pillars of delight. Number 1, it's about removing friction. Number 2, anticipating users' need. And number 3, it's about exceeding expectation. I'm going to walk you through these 3 pillars one by one so we get a clear understanding what I mean by these 3 pillars, okay? Number 1, removing friction. Actually, when we are using product, whatever product, we go through a journey. And this journey is an up and down of emotions. We get excited, we get happy, we get sad, we get stressed, we get anxious. And this is usually represented by what we call the journey, like the journey of emotion or user journey of emotions. Just think about like this is, you are going through the boarding gate to catch your flight. So you can go through different levels of emotions. And we call these like peak moments, and these are valley moments. Could you think for a moment, what if I tweak a little bit my product so that these low moments or these valley moments could be leveraged a little bit? How can I reduce the frictions happening in these moments? So if we can do such a thing, we are trying to reduce friction and we are creating emotional connection between users and products. I want to share with you a quick story. This is a personal story. So I've been in Stockholm last week, and we went to a place, I don't know if it's familiar, it's quite simple. It's not that famous, by the way. This place is called Griffin's. It's a restaurant, and so I took the opportunity to go to this place with some ex-colleagues from Skype and Spotify, and we went for a dinner. And of course, we had a great time. I loved the food. I loved the service. There was one particular moment that I hated, like secretly hated. It was the bill, of course. When you go with people that you don't necessarily know very well, you start to question like, hey, who's going to pay the bill? Like, are we going to split evenly? Who had wine? Who did not? So while all those thoughts were crossing my mind, the waiter came. She placed this QR code. We scanned the QR code. We are able to pick among the list and pay in a complete seamless and easy way. So what was supposed to be an awkward moment and stressful moment turns out to be almost an enjoyable moment. Okay? So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is about anticipating needs. Remember, in delight, we have the element of surprise. And if you have to wait for users to tell you what they want from you or what they need from you, you're not going to surprise them. So you'd rather spend time and energy trying to understand exactly what they need by knowing them by heart and then surprise them by anticipating their needs. Another story I want to share with you. Again, a personal story. So that happened April this year. My family and I flew to Singapore for a family trip. And as soon as we arrived to Singapore, I actually realized that my French mobile plan do not work in Singapore. That was like, felt like back in time. I had to pay roaming and I was not able to have more like a data plan. So I only had 2 options. Either pay like extreme high fees to have like a data on my mobile and phone calls, etc., or try to find a local SIM so that I still keep connected. And while I was at that reflection, I realized that my Revolut app had a feature called eSIM. Did anyone try this before, by the way? Yes. It did surprise me. I mean, this, by the way, the screenshot, like, I loved so much how easy it was that I took a screenshot. Like, you arrive to a destination where you're feeling a little bit lost, and suddenly you have the ability to get an eSIM from your mobile app. But why am I sharing this story in particular? Because I don't think that Revolut users told Revolut, which is a complete, like, a bank app, we need an eSIM. However, Revolut know very well who are their users. They are expat, they are international, they are travelers. So some of their need could be to need this. And for me, that was like a pure example of anticipating needs. Okay? Pillar number 3, which is exceeding expectation. Again, we want to bring this joy to our users, and users are happy and even happier when they are getting more than what they can get or what they expect. And I promise the presentation is full of stories, so this is again another story. This is a story also that happened to me where I was trying to catch a train from Paris to London. So I was trying to get the Eurostar, and I was late, as usual. So I ordered an Uber, and for some reasons, the driver took so much time to come, and then suddenly he actually canceled. Like, I got a notification, your driver is not coming. So I get even more stressed. And the reflex that I had was like, there was a taxi driver passing in front of me, so I stopped that taxi driver, jumped into the taxi. I felt like I'm saved, and I made it, by the way, to the train station. I made it to London. But while I was on the train, I opened the Uber app. I realized that when the first driver canceled, the app looked for a new driver, and a new driver came to my place. He waited for me, and then he left. So I was charged for the waiting time of the second driver, and I was charged for the trip that I did not take, because that's how it worked. I was so pissed off. I mean, pissed off of my behavior, of course, because like, I could have checked, but at the same time, it's not 100% my fault. Like, I didn't really took that trip. So I was prepared psychologically to write that entire text about trying to explain it was not my fault, I want to have my money back, etc. But what surprised me was that it only took me 2 clicks, only 2 clicks, to say, claim refund, check what trip you want to be refunded for, and then done. It turned the price that was supposed to be €35 to 0. That was by far exceeding expectation. Like, my expectation at the time, like, of course I was angry, I was pissed off, I was stressed, but at the same time I was prepared for some awkward experience, and turns out to be so easy. So these are the 3 pillars that we need to remember from tonight. How can we reduce friction? How can we exceed expectation? And how can we anticipate users' needs? Now, how can we put that in actions? Like, now that we understand the concept, understand what delight is, how can we put that in action? I actually created what I call the delight model. So the delight model is, think about it as a simple process you can bring with you today in order to start thinking about building product differently. And by the way, when I put this into a model, I was aware that most of my experience is coming from B2C companies and like Skype, Spotify, etc. Something that I did to make this even more concrete was to interview a large amount of industries and product leaders from different type of companies and industry to make sure that this is applicable actually for everyone. So what is this delight model? It starts with the very first step is to start by identifying users' motivators. What does it mean? For any product you are building, of course, and that's not something new that I'm teaching you today, we need to understand and know our users, or what we call personas. However, what I see, and that's more recently, like when I started coaching companies, I see that most people would do segmentation based on demographic segmentation, like who they are, or at best, behavioral segmentation, like what do they do? That's the who, that's the how, that's the who, that's the what. But the very best one is if you use motivational segmentation, which is the why. And remember, I told you users are using products for different reasons. Some of these reasons could be functional or emotional, by the way, but it's really important to start, and that's the very first step, by listing your users' motivators. Let's do a case study all together. So since I work for Spotify, I picked Spotify as a case study so we understand what I talk about when I talk about motivators. So what could be functional motivators from Spotify? Why do you go to Spotify, by the way? You might go to Spotify because you want to enjoy high-quality music or podcasts. You might go to Spotify because you want to discover new content. Or you might go to Spotify because you're searching for a specific content. If you have an audio track you heard about and you want to listen to it. At the same time, you might go to Spotify for complete different reasons. You might want to go there because you want to feel immersed, you want to have some self-expression, you want to change your mood, you want to feel connected, you want to feel less lonely. I mean, the list could be very long. By the way, these are just examples. The idea is that to start by listing these motivators and classify them into functional motivators and emotional motivators. Okay? Once you've done that, and again, I really insist that that was the foundation, that's the very first step that you need to do, list motivators. You want to start thinking about how to add delight into your product and into your roadmap. So I tweaked a little bit this very famous double diamond framework. I mean, double diamond is something that is very famous. It starts by, the way how I actually tweaked it a bit is that you start with the motivators. Remember, one of the motivators for using Spotify is to feel less lonely, for example. What could be the opportunities that I can explore in my product in order to get that motivators satisfied? And then you define opportunities, and then you move to the solution space where you can brainstorm ideas. No, not that slide. I'm going to skip it. Okay, so let's imagine that you are brainstorming, and you brainstorm on many ideas, and I'm pretty sure you have like great engineers working with you who will come up with lovely ideas. How can I know, or how can you know that these solutions are delightful? And that's why I have a new tool for you today. It's called the Delight Grid. And I would love to share this Delight Grid maybe for some of you for the first time, so that you probably bring it to your team tomorrow. So what is Delight Grid? Delight Grid is a simple representation of the motivators in one simple map or grid. So remember, I told you in the very beginning to start by listing the functional motivators. You place the functional motivators here, and then on the x-axis on top, you place the emotional motivators. Okay? So that's the beginning of your Delight Grid. Why do we do that? Because when you check your solutions and place them in the grid, if they solve one of the functional motivators, then they belong to a category that I call low delight. Now, if you pick a solution and you realize that it's only serving for one of these emotional motivators, then they belong to the surface delight. If one of your solutions is solving for both an emotional motivator and a functional motivator, then they belong, or it belongs to what I call the deep delight. So these are the three categories of delight. Some of them are functional only, some of them are emotional only, and some of them addresses both. Okay? Here the Spotify case study again. Remember, I showed you some of the functional motivators, some of the emotional motivators, and I want to do with you a quick case study using the Delight Grid. A feature like improving search, like when I worked at Spotify, we had to, at some point, to completely revisit the way how you search on Spotify, because at some point it was complete messy. And one of the features we worked on was the search by lyric. Like, you don't know exactly the title of the song, but you have some random words. So these kind of features help you achieve this functional goal, which is searching for an audio content. And I call it more like low delight. So it's very purely technical, purely functional, and it's into that low delight category. Another feature that I had a chance to work on is the Wrapped by Spotify. Like, this is the end of year retrospective you get. And you might agree with me, there is no functional in Wrapped. Like, Wrapped is a pure emotional feature. It helps you to feel how cool you are. You want to share that with your friends. And it helps you with the self-expression, feel connected. But I couldn't find any functional motivators to that feature. And the third example I have is Discover Weekly, another very famous, big success for Spotify. These features belong to the deep delight. Why? Because at the same time, it helps you discover new content, but in a quite personalized way, and it's all about you, it's about your self-expression. So these are the three categories of delight. And the reason why I want to talk about these three categories is because success comes from the combination of the three categories combined. So the best roadmap is the one that will have some low delight, some deep delight, and some surface delight. And that's why I came with this rule. It's called the 50-40-10 rule, which means if you look at your roadmap, ideally you want to have 50% of low delight, 40% of deep delight, and 10% of surface delight. You might be surprised now, like she's coming to talk about delight and she's saying 50% low delight. Of course, I mean, your product has to function after all. It's all about functionality. You cannot ship Spotify without having search or skip or whatever. But at the same time, it would be completely gray product, not connected product if we do not invest on deep delight and surface delight. Okay? Now, I want to share with you few what I call delighters. So the list could be longer, and I did some research to come up with a long list of delighters, but for tonight, I'm bringing 4 delighters that I want to share with you. These are like small tips that you can bring with you and think about how can you bring them into your product to make them more emotionally engaging. Number 1 is, of course, by far, personalization. I mean, that's why like a Starbucks struggle to write your name on a cap. We don't want to be called number 35, your coffee is ready. I mean, we resonate with our names. It's not only about the name, it's about the taste, it's about the preference, and that's why like the best features like Discover Weekly or Netflix recommendations are so successful. The second delighter is celebration. Remember, I told you earlier that there is a journey of emotion. Emotion could be high, could be low. Removing friction happens when emotions are low, but actually when the user is on the peak moments, these happy moments, it's also a great opportunity to connect with the users at the emotional level. They are open to be connected with the product. And I have a great example for you here. I actually use Airbnb both as a guest but also as a host. And as a host, one of my biggest goal is to keep my super host badge. You know, super host is when you're a good host and you work hard on getting it. You are reassessed whether you want to remain super host or not every 3 months based on reviews. And what I love about this story is that every 3 months, if I remain a super host, the app turns into confetti. And even if it's a surface delight feature, it feels like the app is celebrating this achievement with me. It's recognizing my efforts, and I kind of like it. The third delighter, which probably is the easiest, it's actually seasonality. And I played a lot with seasonality, by the way, when I worked for Google Meet. So when I worked for Google Meet, we first introduced background replace as a static image, but we also had a regular calendar for introducing seasonal backgrounds. So we played with events like, of course, Diwali, as you can see here, but also like Easter. We played with Christmas, Ramadan. Even like Olympic Games sometimes has been a great opportunity to connect with users, and users love this. Like, it creates curiosity, it creates also peaks of adoptions in the product. My delighter number 4, which is my favorite, and that's why I'm keeping it for the last, it's about humanization. What I mean by humanization is, think about asking the following question. What if my product was a human, not a tech product? Forget about technology, we're back in time. How would the experience could be better if the product was a human. And the reason why this is really important, because I had this interesting conversation with Andy. Andy is the head of product from Dyson. And I told Andy, like, how come I love my vacuum cleaner? Like, it's a vacuum cleaner. I'm so proud of showing it to my friends and guests, and how come? And he actually told me something really interesting, because Andy said, you know what? We rarely compare our vacuum cleaners to competitors. We will not compare our vacuum cleaners to Bosch or Electrolux or whatever. We compare them to, what if I hire a real person to come and clean my house? How would that be better? Because if you hire a real person to clean your house, you might ask that person to start with a certain room or to clean in a certain way. So they got inspired by this recommendation, and they added recommendation in their product to make them feel a little bit more human. And actually, this is exactly what we did as well at Google Meet. Because when I worked for Google Meet, we rarely compared Google Meet to Zoom or Teams or whatever. We kept comparing Google Meet to what if we were in the same room, having this meeting in the same room? How would the experience be better? And this kind of reflection like inspired us to build features like raise hand or emoji reactions, just to make the product feel more human. Okay. We're approaching the end of the presentation, but there is something extremely important that we need to discuss, which is delight is not something that you put from time to time in your roadmap if you have space for it. It's a culture. It's a mindset. It's something that it will build your brand. It will build your personality. It will build loyalties and customers' love. So in order to get into it as a culture, it requires routine. It requires discussions. It requires like even leaders to drive this. Because I remember when I worked for Google, for example, we had pillars called Delight. A product pillar, not killer, because otherwise it's a product pillar is called Delight, which means that every time you're building a feature, check whether it is aligned with that pillar or not. And it's a great, like a reminder, or as it's called, guiding policy. And since I spoke about Spotify as a case study, but also since I've been working for many years at Spotify, I personally got inspired by this thing. When I worked for Spotify, we used to have a habit, and it's still the case, because I gave this very same presentation last week for Spotify ex-colleagues. They still have hack days, and hack days are regular days where they try to, like, of course, work on innovation. Sometimes it's also about self-improvement, self-development, but it's a routine. And we can only build culture if we talk about the same thing in a regular way and build a routine out of it. So I got inspired by hack days and want to turn it into delight days. That's something that I traveled the world to teach companies and organizations how to set the habit and set the culture through some delight days in the organization. All right, now we're getting close to the end, and I want to share one more thing. That I left Google last year to, of course, put most of my energy and knowledge into the topic of delight, and I'm super excited to share that Product Delight is now not only a talk, it's also a book. It's coming next Tuesday. It will be officially launched on Amazon on Tuesday, so I'm excited actually to bring few copies as early birds for you, for those who want to get know more about the topic. And to finish, I want you to remember these three things, because these are the key things that you want to bring home with you. Number one, delight is a must-have. It's definitely not a nice-to-have, not anymore, at least not these days where competition is hard. It's really important to get yourself differentiated. Delight is actionable. It's not a buzzword, as many of you might think. We've seen there is a model, there are techniques, there are tools that can allow you to get into it. And of course, it's a culture. It's something that leaders have to push for in order to establish it as a routine. With that, first I want to thank you for listening to the talk. And for those who want to connect, I'm available on LinkedIn. This is a QR code for a Substack that I recently launched, where I talk about delight and some delight stories for those who want to subscribe. And I'm excited for your questions.
Thanks a lot. As usual, maybe we can sit while not being blind.
And how can I get not blind?
Can we eventually? Yeah, voilà. We can turn that off.
Okay.
Voilà. So as you know, first we'll have a couple of a side conversation, and then of course we'll let you all ask all the questions that you may have. I'll try to keep it short because I'm sure there are lots of questions in the room. I prepared a couple of things, and maybe I'll start a bit reverse because there's one thing that sparked me in your talk. Say, okay, great, but I was trying also to picture the couple of moments where I had the moment, and I had that one in with my car. I drive some fancy car, and they also have those delight moments, particularly the one the surface one. And I always feel a bit awkward because I'm like, if you spend that time working on that, you probably better fix the basics of my car and my experience.
Yes.
And I was wondering, do you have any advice on how to help companies not fall into that trap of investing a bit too much on the surface delight while not fixing the real problems of applications?
Yeah. So it's, from my perspective, I see this question coming a lot, by the way, where people are asking, when should I start investing in delight? Is it more in the early phase or more rather like once all the must-haves are there?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is usually the same. It's like you don't have to wait for all must-haves to be fixed, because otherwise it will never be fixed, by the way. Must-haves will never end. And what we want to have is to have this brand and this personality early on. We want to have users like attach it to the product early on, and they will forgive the lack of some functionality, especially in your early phase. They will be so much connected to the product that they will love these features that they will just forgive you for having less functionality into it. So usually my advice is like start early, but maybe not too early. Of course, have the basics, the very simple functionality available, and quickly add emotion into the product as quickly as possible. By the way, the best example I can share is Slack. Like Slack differentiated themselves very quickly by not only the functional side, but also by the sleek design, the great emojis, and the great connection that we immediately feel with the product.
Yeah, it's maybe one thing that you just say at the end, especially the culture and the attitude. I think that ultimately, a couple of examples that you give is beyond just being just delight. It's about quality of what you deliver and the experience that you deliver.
So can you be delighted with the quality?
Yeah, or is it actually different in the sense? Because especially when you look at the functional one, there are things that you will like, yes, you would expect actually that level of quality.
Yes.
And it's ultimately just rather of, as you were saying, underlying culture of ensuring that you are delivering an excellent experience.
So I guess maybe some of you at least have watched the Netflix series of the Spotify story. Has anyone watched it? Can anyone remember what was the biggest delighter, like the number one?
The speed to start the sound.
Exactly. So they distinguished themselves. Like what really distinguished Spotify in the early days was how fast it was to get access to the music. That was their like a first proposition, like value proposition. That was the enter to market. They could have stayed only on that, and they will be just a product among others. They kept on investing on like this surface. By the way, I remember when I worked for Spotify, some of the feature I had to work on was we called Canvas. You know this when you open the album on Spotify, instead of having an image, you have a small clip, like a 5-second clips. And people kept asking me, why are you investing your time and energies and engineers and time in adding these small clips? Because it helps the artist to have a visual identity, because they want to feel immersed in the app. So I want to say that it's a combination of surprising users by the technology, but also by surprising them that we are offering something extra.
And when you were referring to your recipe on this 40-40-10, do you believe that this would change depending on the maturity of the product and
It is a guidance, by the way. I mean, I've never seen people achieving 50-40-10 all the time. By the way, something that I did in my PM career was to color features by category. Like I would put a red tag for low delight, green tag for surface delight and blue tag for deep delight. The reason why I was like coloring them was to highlight for my visual like display, is my roadmap all red, or is it all like can I see a bouquet of colors? Because this is a reminder. The 50-40-10 is a reminder that we should build that on a regular basis. But it's okay if you have one quarter where it's only about migration. I mean, it happens sometimes it's going to be all red. The question is, could it depend on the maturity of the product? Yes, it may even depend on the phases where your product is. However, it's good to have it as a guidance. Like every time you're doing a planning cycle, check, am I having enough deep delight? Am I having at least a little bit of surface delight to bring that joy and the warmth of the product?
Yeah. It's funny because I was amused by your example of Uber, because it's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem, right? They cause a friction in the application and the backend experience, then they eventually fixed by two buttons which ultimately shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I don't know if I should
right?
angry or happy, but at the same time, the fact that it went so smoothly, I'm okay taking Uber tonight. You see, like because I know at least it will be easier in terms of if things goes wrong, it won't be like such a pain.
Mm. Well, ultimately, it's really interesting because what you describe, if you look at the lower things, is about culture and ensuring that there is that culture of excellence and going the extra mile. And I think that's really deep into the DNA of the company that you have highlighted. And the second is really about understanding your market beyond just the obvious and ensuring that you satisfy them further than what everyone would expect, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we manage, then it will be a huge differentiator. By the way, I've been showing a lot of personal stories, like for example the Uber thing, but also since I started coaching around this topic, I'm also sometimes talking about delight to bank software. Or like the other day I was talking to someone who was having like a cyber attack software like a protection. So sometimes it's completely where things are unexpected, like where some domains are where delight is not expected, you still have a lot to do. And for example, regarding this, just to share the story, because when I had this discussion with the software that actually tried to protect attack, he actually said one of our emotional motivator for our users is to allow them to feel smarter than the attacker. And if you manage to allow your user to feel that, then we're already winning, because that's a motivator for users to keep using our product. So I mean, of course, the motivators might vary from a product to another, from an industry to another. But remember, emotions are everywhere. And I usually advocate for B2H, not B2C or B2B or B2C, because wherever there is a human at the end using the product, they deserve their emotion to be honored.
And do you have any example of companies where by the addition of those delighters or taking that in mindset, they've seen positive growth or different KPIs on their product?
Yeah, so I've considered, like, of course, Slack is a good B2B example, but the other example that I use in my book, by the way, is Atlassian. Actually, we see a shift. Now we are so exposed to B2C products that we start to expect delight in our B2B products as well. And I had an interview with someone from Atlassian, and he has been showing me their latest update. So there is a blog post called The New Jira, and I was walking through all the features that got released in their latest release, the New Jira blog. And believe me, like 80% of the features, I invite you to check it, by the way, are about delight. Okay. So we see this shift, we see this interest, because that's how they want to distinguish themselves. That's how they want to differentiate from the crowded market.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I'll let everyone now eventually ask the questions. I'll just give the mic, even though we won't hear you louder, but at least your question will be recorded so that we can take advantage of the record afterward. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Yes.
I was just wondering, in the last discussion you both were having, is there such a thing as overdoing delight?
Ooh, overdoing, yes. Of course, I try to talk a lot about the benefits of delight, but there are risks related to overdoing, and sometimes, even if the intention is good, it's about delighting users, it might go wrong. And I would love to share a story how delight can go wrong. Actually, that's a real thing that happened last year in France. Maybe some of you are familiar with a company called Deliveroo. So this is the Uber Eat competitor or whatever. So they wanted, it was Mother's Day in France. Maybe it's the same day here in Belgium. And they wanted to do like a marketing campaign. So what they did was a notification on your phone where it looked exactly like missed call from your mom. So the design of the notification is like missed call from your mom. You press on it, it opens as, hey, it's Mother's Day. Think about sending flower to your mom. We're here for that. We can do it for you. Okay, you're already seeing where I'm going. This campaign, even if the intention was about bringing joy, was completely uninclusive. And it had the worst press coverage, by the way, because people cannot experience the same emotion with such a message or notification. People might enjoy it, others might feel sorrow or sad or whatever. So it's really, really important when you're, especially when we talk about emotion, to consider inclusiveness and ask the following question: could it be harmful in any case? Like, could there be any case where the light might go wrong? Just by asking this question, it's a great starting point. Sorry about this mood.
Quick follow-up.
Yes.
Your example is amazing, but I was more thinking about like your product should actually be so fucking good functionally.
Oh, yes.
And then you overdo on the light.
Yes.
Try to compensate in a way. Yeah.
I see it now. So when I wrote this book, there's an entire chapter where I explain another tool that I didn't get a chance to talk about, which is called the Delight Excellence Checklist. Delight Excellence Checklist is usually the fourth step in the Delight model process, where once you already established all the ideas and all the solutions, you need to check whether delight will be achieved or not. And you know, number one in the Delight Excellence Checklist is business and users' impact. We need to make sure that whatever delightful feature you are building is meeting and aligning with business goal. Delight is not an excuse to add animation or Easter egg or confetti. It has to be aligned with what you want your user to feel and what you want your business to go to. So this is really important. It's not just like for fun. It has to be there for a reason.
Thank you. First, thank you for the wonderful presentation. In Kano, we also know the concept of delight. And one of the learnings there is that delighters, there is an evolution over time. So today a delighter maybe not be tomorrow a delighter. Can you share your experience and your insights on those?
Thank you for bringing this. Yes, I'm a big fan, by the way, of Canoe model. For those who don't know Canoe, it's a way of categorizing features into different categories. Canoe said there is a category called must-have, then performance, then delighters, then a few others. And by the way, there is a big misunderstanding of Canoe because most people think of Canoe as a prioritization technique, which is absolutely not. It's a categorization technique. So they end up having must-have as a priority one, performance priority two, delighters maybe one day. But your question is about habituation effect. This is called the habituation effect because remember, in delight there is surprise, and we are surprised the first time when we see it, but over time the surprise vanish, and this is called habituation effect. We get habituated to the surprise, and so we're not surprised anymore. We are not delighted. So one of the pillars for creating this emotional connection and keeping on delight is to bring it in a continuous way. So it's not only one-time thing, it's something that you need to maintain over time. And I have a great example to share with you because when we first introduced background replace in Google Meet, it was COVID time, by the way, it was very much needed. We first introduced it as an image, like a static image. That was a huge delight. Next step was to introduce video background. Like instead of having an image, you can change your background with an image, with a video. That was another type of delight. And then we introduced immersive background. I don't know if people are using it, like instead of having a big movement, you have a chimney with the snow falling, and it felt like really immersive. And nowadays, you can even have AI-generated, personalized backgrounds. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is because it's really important to maintain this delight in a continuous way. And that's why, by the way, we have this seasonal background, because we want to keep on maintaining this surprise regularly. We even have I know it might be coming. Nobody asked about how to measure delight, but at Google we have a metric called HATS. It's Happiness Tracking Survey. Happiness Tracking Survey is a specific survey where we not only measure happiness, but also we track it over time. So the T is for tracking, because we believe that delight is not a one-off, but we have to maintain it over time. Any other questions?
I had a question. You slightly talked about it at the end of the exchange, but how does your framework and your ideas scale on a B2B as compared to a B2C? Because of course the emotional attachment to the product is maybe not the same, because on a B2B environment it's more of a tool and not something that you expect fun or delight to come. So are there correlations, differences? How does it scale? Yeah.
The concept is the same, meaning that the fact that we're using product for functionality and emotional reasons is the same, whether it's B2B or B2C. However, the type of emotions could be different. Whatever we are expecting from Spotify from an emotional level is not necessarily what you expect from Miro, for example, as an emotional level. And Miro, by the way, is a great example, because the other way, I was talking to some PMs at Miro, and they told me something quite interesting. They said, our users, of course, want to use Miro for the board side, etc., but also they want to use the product because they want to feel a better version of themselves. Like they want to feel being a better facilitator, a better leaders, and if the products manage to make them feel that way, bingo. You see? So again, I'm advocating for B2H, which is business to human. However, what we need to remember is that the range of emotions are not the same. Just figure out this list of emotional motivators for whatever business you're building. All right. Do you want a last question, or okay? Maybe last. All right. Sorry.
Thanks for the talk and all the insights. It was really exciting. You touched upon it just at the very end regarding the metrics. Mind going a little bit deeper into the topic? How can you measure it? You mentioned hats.
Yes.
What is that about? How can you kind of really know if you are really bringing delight to a company or not?
Yes.
Thanks.
Of course, we're all PMs here. We care about metrics. I told you earlier, we are driven toward metrics and OKRs and key results. Of course, delight can be measured. Not all the time it's easy to measure, and I love this quote that says not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that can be measured matter. It doesn't come from me, by the way. But the reality is that when we invest in delight, we are investing in the brand, we are investing in the loyalty, we are investing in the love, and so it's not something that you will measure next quarter. That's the basics. We need to understand that it's not because you're adding delightful feature now that next quarter you will double your retention, you will double your referral, whatever. What I want to share with you that I didn't said so far is that luckily when I started this research, I found huge research that has been done by McKinsey, Deloitte, Capgemini, and Harvard Business Review. The four of them studied the exact same phenomenon over the last 2 years. Like, just think about how much interest is in the industry. And they studied the impact of emotional connection on product adoption. And they came to the following conclusion. Emotionally connected users are twice more likely to recommend your product, twice more likely to buy your product, so from a revenue, and twice more likely to stay longer with your product. So you are, for sure, going to be driving your key metrics. However, if you want to measure the exact delight, I mentioned like HATS. HATS is a survey that is in-house, like a Google in-house survey. But the good news is that it was developed in a research lab at Google. So there's a research paper that explains exactly how you can craft your questions and the technique for it. I'm also describing it in the book. But there are two ways of measuring delight. The low-level delight, like the HATS, the NPS, the CSAT, etc., but also a high-level delight, which is retention, adoption, and referral. Yeah.
All right. I think we have a last.
Two more things. So first of all, thank you for being so curious about the topic. I'm carrying this mission for me, and with the spirit of delight and with the spirit of surprise, I do have one surprise to share with you, because two among you are the lucky winner of Product Delight. You just don't know it yet. And Camille, yes, did an amazing idea. She came with a great idea. The idea is that under your seat, you might have a Post-it. If you have a Post-it, you are the lucky winner of Product Delight today.
So it's not under your seat. It's a little sticker that will be in. You will change it. Adapté now on the time. So there's a little sticker stuck on one of your chairs, on two of your chairs. I think if you look very closely.
Ooh.
I think there's one here.
Do we have a winner?
Did you find your stickers?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
If you want it signed, feel free to come and I will be happy to sign it. And we have the second winner. Yeah. Woo! And of course, I brought few copies, so if you want to be another type of winner is having the book Early Birds. Like, it's going to be on Amazon on Tuesday next week, but you also can have copies from tonight's event as well. So feel free to let me know if you want one. Thank you.